When my HOA president started opening my mailbox every day, I thought she was just nosy. But when I caught her red-handed reading my mail, I decided to teach her a lesson she'd never forget. Let's just say, her next surprise buzzed louder than her gossip ever could. When I first moved into Maple Hollow Estates, I thought I'd finally found peace. The lawns were perfectly trimmed, the mailboxes lined up in neat little rows, and every morning smelled like freshly brewed coffee and fertilizer. It was the kind of neighborhood that looked like it belonged on a postcard, quiet, organized, and controlled by the all-powerful HOA. You could practically hear the rules whispering through the breeze. Trash cans must be rolled in by 6 p.m. sharp. Grass no taller than 3 inches. No paint colors outside the approved palette of beige, white, or slightly darker beige. And, of course, mailboxes must be uniform and properly maintained. That last rule, I didn't know it then, but it would soon become the center of the craziest story of my life. At first, I was okay with all of it. After losing my job in the city and deciding to work remotely, I thought a peaceful community would help me reset. My neighbors were polite but distant, the kind of people who waved without ever learning your name. And at the center of it all was her, Karen Whitmore, HOA president and self-proclaimed guardian of community standards. Karen was in her early 50s, tall, always wearing pressed slacks and a pastel cardigan like she was perpetually headed to a country club. She didn't walk. She marched, clipboard in hand, ready to enforce order. If she ever smiled, it was usually right before she ruined someone's day. The first time I met her was the day I moved in. She appeared out of nowhere as I was unloading boxes from the truck. "Mr. Thompson," she called, in that overly pleasant tone that already sounded like a warning. Yeah?" I said. "I'm Karen, the HOA president. Welcome to Maple Hollow. I just wanted to make sure you received your compliance packet." "Compliance packet?" "Yes, dear." She handed me a neatly stapled set of papers, 30 pages long. Just a few friendly reminders about how we do things around here. She smiled, but her eyes scanned my driveway, the street, and finally the mailbox. "I see your mailbox is one of the older models. You'll need to replace it within 30 days. "Replace it? It looks fine to me." Her smile stiffened. "It's not about looks, Mr. Thompson. It's about uniformity. Consistency is what keeps our property values strong." I nodded slowly, already wondering if moving here was a mistake. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. I worked from home, kept my yard tidy, and minded my own business. Occasionally, I'd spot Karen walking the neighborhood with her clipboard, jotting down notes about who forgot to edge their lawn or left their trash cans out too long. It was annoying, sure, but mostly harmless. Until the day I started noticing something odd. Every afternoon, around the same time, my mailbox door would be slightly open. Not wide enough to look obvious, just a tiny crack. At first, I thought maybe the mail carrier wasn't closing it properly. But then one day, I caught the sound of it, the faint metallic clink of the door closing, followed by quick footsteps. When I looked out my window, I saw her. Karen, clipboard in one hand, my mailbox in the other. I blinked. Surely, she wasn't. But then she looked up, saw me watching, and smiled that same tight, insincere smile before walking off like nothing happened. At dinner that night, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just checking for mailboxes that needed maintenance. Maybe she had a good reason. But as the days went on, it kept happening. Same time, same movement, same fake smile. One afternoon, I decided to test it. I placed a small sticky note inside that said, "Hi Karen, stop touching my mail." The next day, the note was gone. No apology, no explanation, just gone. That was when I realized she wasn't just checking boxes off a list. She was snooping. I mentioned it to my next-door neighbor, Paul, a quiet older guy who'd lived there for over 20 years. He just shook his head. "She's been like that for years," he said. "Thinks she owns the place. People don't fight her anymore. They just give up." "Why hasn't anyone reported her?" I asked. He chuckled bitterly. "Reported her to who?" "She is the HOA." That's when it clicked. Karen didn't just enforce the rules, she was the rules. From that point, I started keeping an eye out. Every time the mail truck came by, I waited an extra 15 minutes before stepping outside. And sure enough, there she was. She'd glance around, open my mailbox, peek inside, and then walk away as if she'd done nothing wrong. One time, I even saw her open my neighbor's mailbox, too. That's when the anger really started to build. It wasn't just nosy, it was illegal. I began recording short clips on my phone, but she was always quick, too far away to get a clear shot. It was like trying to catch a ghost in khaki pants. Still, I wasn't going to let it slide. By the end of the month, I'd replaced my outdated mailbox like she demanded, but this time, I picked one with a built-in camera inside the lid. If Karen wanted to keep poking around, I was going to let her. Only this time, I'd be watching too. And what I caught on camera the next week would not only prove she was guilty, it would set off a chain of events involving bees, chaos, and the most satisfying revenge I'd ever seen. But that's getting ahead of the story. At that moment, all I knew was one thing. Karen had just trespassed on the wrong mailbox. The next morning started like any other. Birds chirping, coffee brewing, the hum of sprinklers misting perfectly lined lawns. But beneath that calm, I was ready. The new mailbox camera had been installed the night before, wired to my phone, disguised as a simple motion sensor. I wanted to believe maybe Karen had finally gotten bored. Maybe my sticky note was enough of a warning. But if I'd learned anything in Maple Hollow, it was that peace here never lasted long, not with Karen around. At exactly 3:37 p.m., the alert pinged. Motion detected, front mailbox. I set my mug down and opened the live feed. There she was, Karen Whitmore, in her pastel cardigan and sun visor, strutting up my walkway like she owned it. Clipboard tucked under one arm, the other hand already reaching for my mailbox. I watched her glance around, left, right, then flip the latch and open it. For a moment, she froze, scanning the envelopes inside. Then she did something that made my blood run cold. She pulled one out. Not just any envelope, one with my name printed in bold letters. My jaw clenched. She unfolded it slightly, scanning the contents, lips moving as if she were reading aloud. Then, as casually as if she'd done nothing wrong, she folded it back and slid it in again. She didn't even close the mailbox properly before walking off down the street, waving to another neighbor like she hadn't just committed a federal crime. That night, I sat at my desk replaying the footage over and over. Each frame made my stomach tighten. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was proof. She wasn't just nosy. She was violating privacy laws, opening government property, and acting like it was her right. But who was I supposed to tell? The HOA? She was the HOA. The police? Over mail snooping, they'd probably just shrug. I decided to start small. I printed the photo stills and taped one to my fridge, my personal reminder that I wasn't crazy. Then I waited. 2 days later, I got a knock on my door. When I opened it, there she was, smiling as if nothing had happened. "Mr. Thompson, I just came by to let you know there's been a concern about your mailbox location," she said, tapping her clipboard. "My mailbox location? Yes. It's technically 4 inches too close to the curb. We're asking homeowners to correct that for uniformity." I couldn't help it. I laughed. 4 inches, Karen? You came all the way here 4 inches. Her smile didn't waver, but her tone sharpened. "Rules are rules, Mr. Thompson. We all have to do our part to keep this community looking its best." I leaned against the doorframe. "Is that before or after you open everyone's mail?" Her eyes widened just a bit. "Excuse me. You heard me," I said. "I saw you. You've been checking my mailbox. That's a federal offense." For a split second, her mask slipped, just a flicker of panic. But then she composed herself again. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. I was merely ensuring compliance with HOA standards. Some residents receive unapproved mail, political flyers, advertisements, even letters that don't fit our aesthetic guidelines." I blinked. "You're saying my mail didn't fit your aesthetic?" "Exactly," she said proudly, as if that made sense. "It's my duty to maintain harmony here." I stared at her, half in disbelief, half in admiration of her audacity. "You really think you're above the law, don't you?" She sighed. "Mr. Thompson, if you're unhappy with how we operate, you're always free to bring it up at the next board meeting." And with that, she turned on her heel and walked off, like she'd just given me a gift instead of a warning. That night, I rewatched the footage again, but this time, I noticed something new. When she opened the mailbox, her eyes weren't just scanning mail. She was looking at the camera. She knew. She'd seen the tiny lens tucked near the latch, and for a second, she'd smiled right at it. Not a normal smile, a smug one, like she was daring me to do something about it. It sent a chill through me. This wasn't just about mail anymore. It was about control. By the weekend, I started hearing whispers from neighbors. "She's been complaining about you," one said. Something about your mailbox being non-compliant. Another neighbor told me. She said you were getting unregistered deliveries, potentially unsafe materials. Whatever that means. So that was her new tactic. Smear me before I could expose her. Classic Karen move. I decided it was time to hit back, but carefully. I wasn't about to lose my temper or play her game. No, I'd play mine. On Monday morning, I called a friend of mine from my college days. Eddie, a local beekeeper who ran a honey farm out in the countryside. Bees, huh? He said, laughing when I told him my plan. You're serious? Completely, I said. But not to hurt anyone, just to teach a lesson. He paused, then chuckled again. Man, you always were the creative one. We worked out the details. A small hive, harmless and docile, just enough to make noise when disturbed. No danger, just panic. The idea alone made me grin for the first time in weeks. That night, as I sat in the garage watching the security feed on my laptop, the world outside was quiet again. The sprinkler mist sparkled in the porch light, the hum of crickets steady and peaceful. But beneath that calm, I could feel something shifting, like the quiet before a storm. Karen thought she'd won. She thought I'd stay quiet, just like everyone else she'd intimidated over the years. But she had no idea that the next time she opened my mailbox, she wouldn't be met with envelopes. She'd be met with a buzz. A very loud, very satisfying buzz. The next few days felt like walking through a minefield. Every time I stepped outside, I half expected to see Karen lurking behind a hedge, clipboard in hand, ready to hand me another compliance notice. And sure enough, she didn't disappoint. On Wednesday morning, I found a neatly folded paper taped to my front door. At the top, in bold, block letters, notice of HOA violation. I sighed and unfolded it. Apparently, my grass was 2 inches longer than allowed. 2 inches. I laughed under my breath. You've got to be kidding me. When I looked up, she was across the street, pretending to water her flowers, but her eyes were locked right on me. That was it. I'd had enough. I walked across the road, the paper still in my hand. She saw me coming, straightened her back, and put on her best fake smile. Good morning, Mr. Thompson, she chirped. Morning, I said. It's barely 8 a.m., and you're already posting violations? She tilted her head, unbothered. Just doing my job. The rules don't take a day off. I held up the paper. This? You're citing me for grass height. Consistency, Mr. Thompson, she said sweetly. If we let one lawn go wild, the whole community suffers. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. What this community suffers from is you thinking you're above everyone else. Her smile didn't falter, but her tone hardened. You might want to be careful with that tone, Mr. Thompson. I could fine you for harassment. Harassment? I scoffed. You've been trespassing on my property for weeks. I caught you on camera opening my mailbox. That got her attention. Her smile vanished for a split second before she composed herself again. I was inspecting, not trespassing, she said calmly. The HOA has the right to monitor property for compliance. Not my mailbox, Karen. That's a federal crime. Only if proven, she said, her voice turning icy. And without concrete evidence, I'm afraid this conversation is over. She turned her back on me. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching her walk away as if she hadn't just admitted to everything. That's when I realized something. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She genuinely believed she couldn't be touched. That night, I replayed our argument in my head a dozen times. Every smirk, every smug word. It was like she'd been rehearsing for years. And I wasn't the first person she'd done this to. I dug deeper. I talked to Paul, my neighbor again. He told me about the Johnsons, who'd moved out last year after Karen fined them nearly $1,000 for having the wrong shade of blue on their shutters. Then there was the Walker family, who she publicly shamed in an HOA meeting for hanging Christmas lights too early. Everyone had a Karen story, but nobody had ever fought back. Until now. The next morning, I walked down to the HOA office, a small, beige building near the entrance of the neighborhood. Inside, a young clerk sat behind the desk, typing slowly. Hey, I said. I'd like to file a complaint about the HOA president. Her fingers froze. She glanced around nervously before leaning closer. You mean? Ms. Whitmore? Yeah, I said. She's been opening my mail. I have video proof. The clerk's eyes widened. Oh, sir, I'm not really supposed to. I'm not asking you to do anything. I interrupted. Just tell me who can. She hesitated, then scribbled a number on a sticky note and slid it across the desk. Try the regional HOA compliance office. They oversee the presidents. I took the note, thanked her, and left. It wasn't much, but it was a start. When I got home, I noticed something strange. My mailbox flag, the little red metal arm, was sticking straight up. I hadn't sent any mail. I opened the lid slowly, and sure enough, there it was, another notice. This one read, "Unauthorized device detected. Remove immediately or face fines." She had found the camera. I couldn't help but laugh. "You're bold, Karen. I'll give you that." But what she didn't realize was that I'd already backed up the footage. Every frame, every timestamp. It was all safely stored on my laptop and an external drive. She could destroy the camera, but the evidence was already alive and buzzing in my possession. That night, Paul came over with 2 beers. "I heard she called a board meeting about you," he said. "Good," I replied. "Let her dig her own hole." He chuckled. "You sound calm for someone about to face the neighborhood firing squad." "Oh, I'm calm," I said, grinning. "Because she's about to face one too." He raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning?" I smiled, but didn't answer. Let's just say she won't forget it. The next day, I sent an anonymous email to the regional HOA office, attaching the video of Karen opening my mailbox. I didn't add commentary. No accusations. Just facts. Then I waited. It took only 2 days for the storm to start brewing. Karen came stomping down the street, red-faced, clutching her clipboard like it was a shield. "You think you're clever, don't you?" she snapped as soon as I opened the door. I kept my expression neutral. "Good afternoon, Karen. You reported me," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Held you accountable," I said simply. She took a step forward. "You're making a huge mistake. I've been part of this board for 15 years. No one touches me." I smiled faintly. "Then I guess it's about time someone did." Her eyes flared. For a second, she looked like she wanted to hit me, but instead, she pointed her clipboard at my face. "You'll regret this," she said through clenched teeth. "Mark my words." Then she spun around and stormed off, slamming her heel into the pavement with every furious step. I closed the door slowly, a calm smile spreading across my face. It wasn't over, far from it. She'd just declared war, and I wasn't backing down this time. Because she could threaten, fine, or lecture me all she wanted. But the next time she reached for my mailbox, she'd learn that even the quiet ones know how to sting. The sun rose over Maple Drive like nothing had happened. Birds chirping, sprinklers hissing, neighbors pretending life was normal. But under that perfect calm, war was quietly brewing. Karen hadn't spoken to me since our last confrontation, but she didn't need to. The message came loud and clear the next morning when I opened my mailbox. Empty. No mail. At first, I thought maybe the postal worker skipped me. But then I checked the ring footage. At 6:43 a.m., Karen walked right up to my property again, gloved hands, sunglasses, clipboard, and opened my mailbox. Again. But this time, she didn't just look. She took it. I paused the footage. There it was, clear as day. She pulled out 2 envelopes, tucked them into her blazer, and walked off like she owned the place. My jaw tightened. This wasn't about rules anymore. This was an obsession. That evening, I sat in my garage, staring at the footage frame by frame. Her expression was so smug it made my blood boil. She wasn't scared. She enjoyed it. That's when I decided I wouldn't just expose her. I'd make her feel it. My dad always said, "Son, if you ever want to stop a bully, make them trip on their own ego." So, I pulled up my laptop, opened a blank document, and started planning. The next day, I went to the post office. The clerk, an older guy with kind eyes, looked up as I approached. "Morning," I said. "Quick question. If someone keeps opening my mailbox, what can I do about it?" He frowned. "Opening or tampering with mail. That's a federal offense. You got proof?" I smiled. "Crystal clear." His eyebrows rose. "Then report it. Local law enforcement and USPS inspector. They'll handle it." I nodded, then leaned closer. "What if I wanted to discourage her from trying again?" He smirked knowingly. "Long as you don't hurt her, son, sometimes a little sting goes a long way." I chuckled. "Yeah, something like that." That night, the plan took shape. I ordered a small transparent hive, the kind used for educational displays, and placed it inside a fake wooden mailbox liner I built in my garage. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted to make sure Karen never touched my mailbox again. A few harmless honeybees would do the trick. The next morning, I put this special delivery in place. From the outside, the mailbox looked perfectly normal. But inside, under a thin plastic divider, a few buzzing tenants were already moving in. I spent the rest of the day pretending everything was normal, mowing the lawn, chatting with neighbors, even waving to Karen when she passed by. She didn't wave back. She never did. But I saw her eyes dart toward my mailbox more than once. Good. Let curiosity do the work. By evening, I was inside reviewing the footage again when it happened. At exactly 7:09 p.m., Karen appeared on camera. Clipboard, gloves, sunglasses, evening patrol mode. She looked around, checking both directions, then approached my mailbox. She hesitated for half a second, like she knew she shouldn't, and then lifted the lid. The moment it opened, she froze. Her face twisted in confusion. Then a soft buzz. She leaned closer to look. And then the swarm moved. A blur of golden wings shot out like living confetti. Karen screamed, high-pitched, panicked, and stumbled backward into the street, waving her arms wildly. The camera caught every second, the clipboard flying, the sunglasses falling, her perfect white blazer flapping as she ran toward her house like it was on fire. I couldn't help it. I laughed until I cried. For once, the queen of control had completely lost hers. The next morning, the whole neighborhood was buzzing, literally and figuratively. Someone had uploaded the footage to the community group chat. Not me, though I wasn't complaining. The video title read, HOA Karen Meets Nature's HOA. Within hours, it had more views than any neighborhood post ever. The comments were brutal. Guess the bees didn't like being inspected either. Finally, some real enforcement. Hope she finds herself for trespassing. I had to admit, it felt good. But the satisfaction didn't last long. By noon, a white SUV pulled up in front of my house. City code enforcement. Karen had filed another complaint, claiming I'd installed a dangerous structure. The officer stepped out, clipboard in hand, and gave me a half-smile. Mr. Thompson, we received a report about your mailbox. I gestured toward it. Go ahead. Take a look. He peeked inside carefully. The hive was already gone. I'd released the bees early that morning into the garden. All that was left was a few harmless drops of honey and an empty liner. He turned back, trying not to laugh. I'm assuming the incident last night was accidental? Absolutely, I said. Must have been a wild swarm looking for shelter. He nodded slowly, lips twitching. Right. Well, I'd say your mailbox is compliant now. Have a good day, sir. Karen stood across the street watching, red-faced, fists clenched, humiliated. And for the first time ever, she had nothing to say. That evening, Paul came over with a huge grin. Dude, you won. I raised an eyebrow. Won what? He laughed. The war. Everyone saw that video. She's done. Nobody's listening to her anymore. The HOA's having an emergency meeting tomorrow. I leaned back in my chair. Guess karma delivers faster than the mail. We both laughed. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. It was about balance, about showing everyone that no one, not even the queen bee herself, was untouchable. And as I stood in the driveway watching the sun sink behind the rooftops, I could almost hear my dad's voice again. Some fights, son, aren't about winning. They're about reminding people what right looks like. I smiled. The bees had done their part. Now it was my turn to finish the job. The next morning, Maple Drive felt different. Not quieter, exactly, just uneasy. Like everyone had seen the same thing and didn't know whether to laugh or whisper. Karen's bee fiasco had become neighborhood legend overnight. And if humiliation was honey, she was drowning in it. But I knew Karen Brooks. She wasn't the kind of woman to back down just because nature gave her a reality check. She'd come back, meaner, pettier, and desperate to claw her control back. And she did. At 9 a.m. sharp, a new notice appeared on my door. This one was longer than usual, printed in bold red letters like a declaration of war. Resident found in violation of HOA Code 7.3a, installation of unauthorized hazardous wildlife habitat. Immediate disciplinary hearing to be held tomorrow, 6 p.m., Community Center. I almost laughed out loud. She'd actually called a meeting over bees. Paul stopped by right as I finished reading it. Dude, you can't make this stuff up, he said, shaking his head. She's doubling down? Oh, she's not just doubling down, I said, waving the notice. She's digging her own grave. He grinned. Are you going to that meeting? Oh, I wouldn't miss it for the world. By the next evening, The entire neighborhood had packed into the Willow Creek Community Center. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls, the air thick with gossip and curiosity. Karen sat at the head table, her usual throne, wearing a white suit so pristine it almost glowed under the fluorescent lights. Beside her sat 2 board members and 1 very nervous secretary. When she spotted me walking in, her lips tightened into something between a smirk and a snarl. "Mr. Thompson," she said, voice sweet as poison. "Glad you could make it. We're here to discuss your deliberate endangerment of our community." I leaned on the podium, calm. "Oh, I'm looking forward to that discussion." She clicked her pen and started reading from a document. "According to witness reports," she said, "you deliberately placed a hive of bees inside your mailbox with intent to cause harm." I raised my hand. "Objection." She blinked. "Excuse me. This isn't court," I said. "But even intent has to be proven. Unless you have evidence of me installing insects." Snickers rippled through the crowd. Her jaw tightened. "You think this is funny?" I shrugged. "A little." That's when Paul, sitting near the back, coughed loudly. "Maybe the bees just wanted to file a complaint." Laughter erupted. Karen's face turned crimson. She slammed her papers down. "Enough. This is serious. Our community deserves accountability." "Agreed," I said softly. "Which is why I brought some evidence of my own." The room went still. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive, plugged it into the projector, and there she was, on the big screen. Karen Brooks, HOA president, caught on camera opening my mailbox, stealing mail, trespassing on private property. Timestamped. Clear as daylight. Gasps filled the room. One woman in the front whispered, "Oh my God, that's illegal." Karen froze, color draining from her face. I don't know what that is," she stammered. "That could be fabricated." I smiled faintly. "Really?" "Because it's from a Ring camera, and I already submitted the footage to the postal inspector." The room exploded in murmurs. Even the board members shifted uncomfortably. I clicked to the next clip, the moment she opened the mailbox again, the night before the bees. "Here's your wildlife habitat violation," I said. "A trespassing HOA president, captured twice tampering with federal property." Her voice cracked. "You set me up." I looked at her. "No, Karen. You set yourself up." I just pressed the record. The laughter this time wasn't cruel, it was relieved. Everyone in that room had been waiting for this. The mask was gone. The queen bee had lost her hive. Elaine, the board's vice chair, cleared her throat. "Karen, is this true?" Karen's eyes darted between faces, searching for allies that weren't there anymore. "I was just ensuring compliance," she sputtered. "I was protecting the community." "By stealing mail?" Elaine said sharply. "That's a federal crime." The secretary whispered something into Elaine's ear, then nodded grimly. "Karen," Elaine said, "you're suspended from your position pending investigation." Karen's pen fell from her fingers. "You can't do this to me." "I'm afraid we can," Elaine replied. I stepped back, watching as the woman who'd tormented me for weeks sat speechless for the first time. Around me, the neighbors whispered, not in fear, but in relief. You could feel it, the weight of her rule lifting. Paul leaned over from the side. "Dude, this is better than Netflix." I smirked. "Told you it'd sting." Karen stood abruptly, chair scraping back. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll regret humiliating me like this." I met her eyes, calm and steady. "No, Karen. You'll regret underestimating everyone you bullied." She glared at me for a long moment, then turned and stormed out of the hall, her heels echoing like thunder. The door slammed behind her. And just like that, the reign of Karen Brooks was over. After the meeting, people came up to me, neighbors who hadn't spoken in weeks. One man shook my hand. About time someone stood up to her. Another laughed. "Can't believe you caught her like that." Even Mrs. Green, the kind old lady from the corner house, patted my shoulder and whispered, "Your father would have been proud, dear." I smiled at that one, because she was right. This wasn't just about me. It was about fairness, about protecting something that mattered. As I drove home, the headlights of the Mustang lit up the familiar street. The same trees, the same houses, but somehow, it all felt new again. No letters taped to doors. No cold stares. Just peace. When I parked, I looked across the street. Karen's house was dark, her car gone. For the first time since moving back, the night felt quiet in a good way. I leaned against the hood of my car, looked up at the stars, and whispered, We did it, Dad. The engine ticked softly as it cooled, like a heartbeat finally slowing down. Justice, not revenge. That was what this had been about all along. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. For the first time in months, the next morning on Maple Drive was quiet. No notes on my door. No HOA patrols. No Karen. Just peace. Real, heavy, earned peace. But it didn't come easily. By sunrise, the gossip mill was spinning faster than a lawnmower blade. Mrs. Green called first. "Michael, dear, you won't believe it," she said, voice half whisper, half laugh. "Karen's been removed from the HOA entirely. The board's calling it a temporary leadership restructuring." I grinned. That's one way to say it. "She's furious," Mrs. Green added. "But she can't do anything. The city's investigating her for tampering with federal property. Tampering with mail, that's no small thing. Even for someone like Karen Brooks, the queen of compliance, the law doesn't bend." I thanked Mrs. Green, hung up, and stepped onto the porch. The air felt different. Lighter. Like the whole neighborhood had finally exhaled after holding its breath too long. By mid-morning, people were walking again, not rushing, not hiding behind hedges. They waved. They smiled. Even the Watson kids had their basketball hoop back up. It was like life was quietly coming back to Willow Creek. And yet, across the street, her house stood like a monument to silence. Curtains drawn. The car is gone. The perfect lawn now sprinkled with fallen leaves. Paul stopped by with coffee. He leaned on my porch railing and smirked. "It feels weird without her, doesn't it?" "A little," I said. "Like the air's too clean." He laughed. "Man, you turned the whole neighborhood into fans overnight. I heard someone call you the Bee Avenger." I groaned. "Oh, great. I'm a meme now." "Bro," he said, holding out his phone. "You are the meme. Look." There it was, a screenshot of Karen running from the mailbox, bees swirling around her head, captioned, "HOA Karma. Delivered special buzzing." It had over 20,000 views on the local Facebook group. I shook my head, half laughing, half embarrassed. "Guess fame finds you when you least want it." Paul grinned. "You earned it." But underneath the laughter, something softer lingered, the memory of my dad. I looked over at the Mustang, gleaming under the morning sun, and felt that old ache again. He'd taught me to fix what's broken, not just with tools, but with patience. He'd taught me that respect isn't about fear, it's about fairness. And that's what this fight had really been about. Not bees, not cars, not even Karen, but standing up when someone crosses the line, quietly, firmly, without losing yourself. By noon, I noticed something strange. A black sedan parked in front of Karen's house. Two men in suits got out, city inspectors. One of them carried a clipboard, the other held a camera. They rang her bell. No answer. They rang again. Finally, the door opened. Karen stepped out, sunglasses hiding her face, lips pressed into a hard line. They spoke briefly. Then she pointed toward her garage. The inspectors nodded, took photos, and handed her a folded paper, official-looking. When they left, she just stood there, staring down at it. Then she ripped it in half and threw it into the trash. I didn't need to hear the words to know what it said. Zoning violations. Unauthorized property use. Pending fines. Karma doesn't need an audience. It just needs time. That evening, the HOA sent an official email to all residents. Effective immediately, Karen Brooks has been relieved of all HOA duties pending a full ethics review. Interim leadership will be appointed until further notice. We appreciate your patience during this transition. No signatures. No apologies. Just closure. Paul texted me 5 minutes later. Translation: Queen Bee got dethroned. I smiled at the screen, set the phone down, and went outside. The sky was a deep orange, the kind that made the Mustang's hood glow like molten fire. I leaned against it, sipping coffee, listening to the soft creak of the old oak tree. For the first time, the neighborhood didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home again. 2 days later, I saw a moving truck pull up to Karen's driveway. Her furniture, her fancy garden decor, her white patio chairs, all loaded in silence. No one came to say goodbye. No one waved. She looked smaller now, shoulders hunched, movements stiff. She caught my eye once across the street, and for a moment, it wasn't anger I saw. It was a regret. Then she turned away. By sunset, the truck was gone. And just like that, the storm that had ruled Maple Drive for years finally broke. Weeks passed. Life returned, slow, steady, peaceful. The HOA, under new leadership, actually started helping people instead of harassing them. Fines turned into community projects. Meetings turned into barbecues. And for once, the neighborhood's rules weren't about control. They were about connection. Mrs. Green even started a new motto for the group: community, not compliance. It stuck. One Saturday, I found myself in the garage again, polishing the Mustang. The engine purred softly as it idled, echoing through the quiet street. I smiled, looking at the framed photo of my dad above the workbench. "Looks like we did it, old man," I said. Kept her running, and the neighborhood too. A soft breeze blew through the open garage, scattering a few fallen leaves. Somewhere down the street, a kid laughed. The world felt lighter. That night, before heading in, I sat on the porch one last time. The air smelled like rain and cut grass. The kind of smell that meant peace was finally real. I watched the stars flicker through the branches of the oak tree, the same tree my dad and I once strung Christmas lights on. And I thought about everything that had happened: the fines, the letters, the bees, justice. All of it led to this: quiet, balance. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even proud. I was just content. Because sometimes, the best kind of victory isn't loud or dramatic. It's simply the moment you realize the fight's over, and you didn't lose yourself in the process. I looked at the Mustang one last time, gleaming under the streetlight, and whispered, "Promise kept, Dad." Then I turned off the porch light. For the first time in forever, the street stayed still, no patrols, no orders. Just the gentle hum of peace earned the hard way. Winter came early that year, the kind of cold that made the air taste like metal and memories. For the first time in months, Maple Drive was alive. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Kids were building snowmen near mailboxes that once carried warnings. Porches glowed with holiday lights instead of HOA notices. And every time I passed the old community center, I caught myself smiling. The sign out front had been changed. It no longer read Willow Creek Homeowners Association. Now it said Willow Creek Neighborhood Council, building community together. It was subtle, but it meant everything. I spent most of December in the garage, keeping the Mustang ready. Dad's old wrench hung on the pegboard, a quiet reminder of promises kept. The same promise that started this whole mess: keep her running, son. I wiped down the hood, tracing my reflection in the red paint. It gleamed like fire under the heater light, warm and alive even in the cold. "You still look good, old girl," I murmured. Sometimes I imagined Dad was there, leaning over my shoulder the way he used to. He never said much while we worked, just a quiet hum of approval or a nod when something fit right. Now, that silence felt like conversation. One snowy morning, a letter arrived. Not the kind printed on HOA letterhead. Not a fine. A thank you note. From the new HOA board, or Neighborhood Council, as they called it now. "Mr. Thompson, your patience and persistence have reminded us that community isn't about power, it's about people. We're inviting you to our annual winter gathering as our guest of honor. Thank you for helping us rebuild what we forgot: integrity." I read it twice, then smiled. Dad would have laughed at the idea of me being anyone's guest of honor. But this one felt right. The winter gathering was held in the same hall where Karen's last stand had taken place. Except now, the air smelled like cinnamon, not tension. There were tables of cookies, kids laughing, people talking freely. Even Paul was there, handing out hot cocoa. He spotted me near the entrance. Look who finally showed up, the legend himself. I rolled my eyes. "Oh, come on." He grinned. "No, seriously. You changed this place. You think anyone else would have stood up to her?" I shrugged. "I just wanted peace. And you got it," he said, clinking his cup against mine. "You and your bees." We both laughed. Later, Mr. Jenkins, now officially the new HOA president, called everyone's attention. "Folks," he said, tapping his glass, "this community's been through a lot this year. But tonight, we celebrate more than a new beginning. We celebrate a reminder that fairness and courage still matter." He gestured toward me. "And we owe that reminder to one man, Michael Thompson." Applause filled the hall. For a moment, I didn't know what to do. Then I just smiled, nodded, and said softly, "Thank you." Mr. Jenkins handed me a small plaque. For standing up, with proof, not noise. It made me laugh a little, Dad's words, carved into wood. After the event, I stepped outside. Snow was falling, soft and slow, coating the world in quiet light. The street lamps glowed through the flakes, and for a second, everything looked almost cinematic. Then I heard it, the deep, familiar rumble of the Mustang's engine. Paul had started it for me, letting it idle in the cold. I walked over, brushed snow from the windshield, and slid inside. The leather was cold, but the warmth spreading through the steering wheel felt like home. I turned up the heat, adjusted the rearview mirror, and there it was. Dad's photo, tucked behind the speedometer, grinning like he knew the ending already. I drove slowly through Willow Creek, past the houses that once felt hostile, past the mailboxes that had once been battlegrounds. Now they were just part of a neighborhood again, ordinary, peaceful, human. When I reached Karen's old house, I noticed the for sale sign was gone. A young family had moved in. I could see kids' bikes by the porch, Christmas lights wrapped unevenly around the railing. It made me smile. The house wasn't cursed anymore. It was living again. As I turned onto the main road, I caught my reflection in the side mirror, tired, older maybe, but calmer. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't waiting for the next fight. I was just free. Dad used to say, when you fix something right, it stays fixed, even when you're gone. Maybe that's what legacy really meant. Not fame, not recognition, just the quiet satisfaction of knowing you left something better than you found it. Back home, I parked the Mustang under the oak tree, the same one where this story began. Snow dusted its branches like powdered sugar, soft and peaceful. I cut the engine and sat for a moment, watching my breath fog up the air. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of laughter from the neighbors, full of memories from the past, full of lessons that didn't need to be spoken. I reached over, picked up Dad's old wrench from the passenger seat, and whispered, "Promise kept." The streetlight above flickered once, then glowed steady, like a nod from somewhere beyond. Inside, the house was warm and quiet. I made myself a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the snow fall over the neighborhood that had finally found its balance again. The Mustang sat in the driveway, red against white, glowing softly under the lamplight, a symbol of everything worth fighting for: respect, patience, legacy. I smiled. Then, without meaning to, whispered, "Thanks, Dad." The wind brushed against the window like an answer. And for the first time since all this began, I didn't feel like I was fighting anymore. I felt like I was home.